Good evening and welcome to the August 27th meeting of the Civil Service Commission. And we have roll call, please.
Commissioner Yakubian?
Yes.
Vice Chair Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Manukian?
Here.
Commissioner Yarigi?
Here.
And Chair Gazarian should arrive shortly.
Okay. There are certain items that I believe Chair Gazarian should be present for, so I'm going to skip around and take some of the items that we can dispense with before he gets here. First of all, minutes.
Unfortunately, I cannot vote on that item.
You were here, Mike?
I was.
You were here?
Yes, I was.
Yes.
So do I hear a motion to
Motion to approve.
and dispense with reading?
Yes, dispense with reading.
Yes, second.
Okay. That'll be by unanimous consent.
I have to abstain that one.
And I'm sorry, Commissioner Manukian will be abstaining. The next item is oral communications. I do want to wait until Commissioner Gazarian is here for the oral communications portion. Take number 4 next, recruitment and examination report. Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is your recruitment and examination workload status report. This report illustrates the recruitment activity that is currently going on with the city and its staff. This report does show the positions at the various stages of recruitment, filing period, dates of exam, whether these exams are promotional, open, or hourly. The report illustrates really what the recruitment load is pretty much the same level as it's been the past few months. As we finish some processes, we get new ones that come through. Again, once the positions are done, we go ahead and create eligibility lists. But this item, again, is just a note and file. If you have questions about any of these recruitment processes, I'd be happy to answer those questions for you.
Any questions?
No.
No.
Okay. Next item will be the eligible list established. Mr. Doyle.
Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, again, this is the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting. As I often say, this is the culmination of our various recruitment processes. This report shows, again, the recruitment exams that have occurred and various information about them, whether they were promotional or open. You have a column with the total number of applications, and then ultimately in that far right column you see the total number of candidates who made it onto our eligibility lists. As you can see from the various open recruitments, typically we have very, very high number of applications, and then by the time the process is done, we have a relatively short list, and this report is fairly indicative of that. Anyway, sort of a testament to the how challenging our processes are. But and this is a note and file item. If you have any questions about any of these recruitments and the processes, I'd be happy to try and answer those for you.
Any questions?
No.
Okay. The next item, we would do reports. What I'd like to do now, and I know it's going to be maybe difficult because of the number of people here, but we do have a closed session item, number 12, which I believe we can dispense with fairly quickly. And I'd like to take that one out of turn, go into closed session, have the hearing on that, and then when Mr. Gazarian, he should be here by then, we can get into the rest of the agenda. So Mr. Doyle or Ms. Farpetian, could you explain how we can get into that closed session?
We can certainly do that. We can if all the parties are here for the closed session, we can read the item into the record, then ask everyone to step outside, go to the closed session. We will then hear the matter. If we have something to report out, then we will. The cameras will be off, so we'll come back. We generally do not report out on TV, so we'll follow our practice in doing that. And then we'll go back and go into open session. So if that's the direction you're going in, then I would ask Ms. Abramian to read the item into the record.
Item 12A, Public Employee Appointment, Request for Reinstatement for the position of Community Service Officer, Custody.
Okay. With that, we will ask to have all parties, with the exception of the ones on that item, step outside. It'll go very quickly, so don't go too far away. And you want to read that one in the record, please?
Item 10A, Past Due Employee Performance Evaluations.
Mr. Doyle.
Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this item is the report we bring to you once a month on past due performance evaluations. There are, although the departments listed here, those with no past due performance evaluations there are, looks like 5 departments like that. We have listing of those with the first notice past due and then the second notice, and pleased to say there are no third past due notices. Again, this is a note and file item for your information only.
Any questions on that?
No.
It is noted and filed. Okay. You have not heard again from Mr. Gazarian?
He should be very close,
Should
I
we
think.
contact him?
Yeah,
and
let's
see where he is?
contact. I'd really like to have him here for these next items.
Okay.
Very important.
All right. In the worst case, we can take a short, there's no other item on the agenda left?
No, that's
Okay.
it.
All right. Can we take a 5-minute break?
Now, let's do a 5-minute recess, and then we'll reconvene in 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. We're back on the record. Sorry for being late. Next item, please. Thank you. I have a card in my hand. Mike Whitaker. Mr. Whitaker, please.
Thank you very much. I've given 7 copies so that they could be included. So thank you. Yes.
I'm sorry, just for the record, that we allow each speaker 5 minutes to speak, and please state your name for the record.
Mike Whitaker. So 27-year employee with the city of Glendale. Very pleased to be an employee here. And I have great appreciation since I live in the community. So I appreciate the work you do. I also have great respect for the civil service process, and I consider it my privilege to be here with you today to attempt to appropriately find a way to exercise the rights afforded to me. So, in particular, I'm representing myself and no other group of employees. And the comments that I'll make and the request I make of you is for me personally and not a part of any bargaining unit. So I'm here today to request 3 things of the Commission. The first would be for your future clarification of Civil Service Rule 11, Section 2F, which actually relates to layoffs and the transfer of employees to prevent the layoff of employees. The second thing that I would ask really relates to a request, and because it involves sensitive information related to a previous investigation, I would simply request that item 2 in my letter be for the Commission to read versus me verbalizing those concerns because of the impact upon other employees, past and present. But in essence, it would just be that I have concerns that my participation in this investigation could be having current consequences upon me as an employee.
I'm sorry, I just need to stop you there. If you're concerned about information that's in the handout that you've distributed, the handout is a public record. So
Yeah,
I need you to be aware of that.
Thank you.
And forgive me, Mr. Whitaker, with that in mind, I would like to direct the question to Ms. Barbethian. I have not read it yet. I'm just looking at the first page. I haven't seen any sensitive information as to any employee or as to any personnel discipline declarations or statements. If this is a public document, as you've just stated, how does that run afoul, or does it run afoul, of privacy interests of the employee that it is referencing, if it is referencing an employee?
I don't know that any of us have reviewed it in the detail in any detail. Just glancing over it, I don't see any names, but I don't see the content. You just need to know that this is a public record. So if a request is made for it, then we're obligated by law to produce it.
And as a responsible coworker of my cohort, I've attempted to be as responsible as I could and to afford protections to people who might wish them.
Okay.
Very well.
Thank you for that clarification. And thank
We
you.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Finally, the third part is It's actually a request for reinstatement on my part to the ranks of administrator in the organization. The organization has afforded me the opportunity to consider this, and in essence, have been directed that I kind of need to get clarification from this body as to whether or not I actually would possess the right to be reinstated to the administrator ranks, whether that would be by layoff reinstatement, transfer reinstatement, or by acting assignment, in essence, functioning in a role for so long that it's time to begin to acknowledge that in an acting capacity. So that would be the three things that I would request of this body. And I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
I have a question.
Before I entertain questions, Mr. Doyle, is there any light that you care to shed as to the request made and as to the viability of this body to make a decision vis-a-vis filling a vacant position?
And keep in mind, this is coming up during oral communication.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I could respond to many of the things that Mr. Wiedeker has brought forth here, but I'm not sure
The time constraints?
Well, to what extent the city attorney would allow for
Very well.
such
I'm going to
dialogue.
entertain
So-
questions, and then if it's appropriate, I will ask that this item be agendized at a future hearing.
That's what I was going to suggest. That my suggestion would be, let's agendize this item if it has to be at a closed session, whatever the appropriate venue, so at least we can find out and get to the bottom of exactly what it is we're being asked to do, and yet not hurt anyone during this process. So, and we appreciate your approach, and that would be my recommendation.
That is a very, very, very sound recommendation. Thank you, Commissioner Manukian. Yes, Commissioner Yakubian?
I actually wanted to ask Mr. Whitaker with respect to item number 2 that he previously mentioned. To the extent that it references yourself, I'm assuming that you have no issues with disclosing that bit of information. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I just believe it should be done in closed session.
Okay,
Okay.
fair enough.
And I would, if it's in the form of a motion, I would certainly second Commissioner Manukian's suggestion or motion to agendize this, and in doing so, ask staff to report and analyze it and give us a report on each of the 3 items. So that we understand
Turn on your mic.
Would your, forgive me, Commissioner Manukian, would your motion be to agendize it as a closed item motion?
Yeah, I think then that way we can.
We cannot do that, Ms. Warbetson?
No, there are limited circumstances under which you can take items under consideration in closed session. This would not be one of them.
Okay.
But I wonder to what extent the request that's being made of you today is ripe for commission consideration. And maybe a more appropriate response would be for the commission to be advised of the various rules that are at play without being very specific, and allow the appointing authority to address some of the points that Mr. Whitaker has raised, and allow for that a determination to be made at that level before it's ripe for commission review.
Well, actually,
Let me
But I'm
clarify.
kind of vague as to the process. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Let me clarify what I was asking for. What I was asking for is for HR to come back. First of all, there are some items here I don't even understand what we're being asked to do. Number 2, I like to also hear their approach to this, that if it's not going to be closed session, let it be an open session, just so we understand what is it we're being asked to do and what areas is this affecting.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, it's my understanding is that Mr. Wiedeker is seeking a clarification of the Civil Service Rule 11, Section 2F, which has to do with transfer in lieu of layoffs. It's a relatively simple concept. Again, I'd be happy to address that with the commission if we're permitted to.
Not this evening. I'd like it agendized. There is a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
If that motion does not run afoul of any procedure, I'd like the motion to be voted on.
Well, you don't need a motion to agendize an
Okay.
item, so you don't need that.
Okay.
The concern that I'm raising is whether or not this is ripe for commission review at this time.
Forgive me for interrupting. Hold on a second, Mr. Whitaker. When you say you don't know if it's ripe for commission review, my question
I
is...
believe it is not. I don't
I don't
believe.
even know what it is.
Let me please finish my thought. If the appointing authority or any entity is going to shed light as to this memorandum that was provided to us just now, if that's going to be in written form, we'd have to discuss it in an open session, correct?
Only if it's within your jurisdiction, correct?
Well, is there any doubt as to any of this being not within our jurisdiction?
Well, not every action that's taken between a supervisor and a subordinate is appealable to the Civil Service Commission.
That's correct. I don't even...
That's not the
that's
case,
correct.
then it wouldn't be ripe for commission review.
Yeah, now I see your point. So your recommendation is what? That you send, somebody gives us a written analysis of what Mr. Whitaker is suggesting?
Well, it's certainly an analysis of the rules and whether or not what is ripe for review by the commission, and allow the process to transpire between Mr. Whitaker and the HR director.
May I ask?
Yes, you may.
Well, Mr. Whitaker started this whole discussion with saying that he was referred to this body as a first step towards achieving your ultimate goal. So my question to you is, who was it that referred you to this body, and then what exactly did they say that you had to do here?
Thank you. I contacted Mr. Doyle, who was very gracious in responding to me regarding a request for reinstatement. And he very appropriately said, I have touched base with the new Director of Public Works, who is not yet determined how he's going to structure his department. He's new effective July 1st, and until he renders a decision about the vacant position in which you are requesting to be reinstated, it would be premature for me to go ahead and provide any other information about this.
I don't mean to interrupt you. It sounds like it's worthwhile information, but to answer Commissioner Yakubian's question, who directed you to us?
I then subsequently met with the director himself
Yes.
to say, I understand, here's my information and my request. I would love to discuss it with you. He was very gracious, and the bottom line was, he said, look, I do not know how I'm going to organize my department, all the various vacancies, and how I'll utilize them. However, if you have a right, per the civil service rules, to be reinstated, I would have no problem with that. I would not want to stand in the way of any employee exercising that potential right. And so, no skin off my nose. I made sure that he knew that, this would mean instead of you restructuring and doing something with that position, I would be filling it. He understood and said, that's something that you should explore with the commission. If they don't see it that way, so be it. If they do, I have no problem with it. So that's my explanation of how I came to be directed to you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm going to ask of my fellow colleagues to entertain that this body direct Mr. Doyle or the appointing authority or both to work with one another and provide us a report as to what remedy, if any remedy, is available for Mr. Whitaker before this body. And if it is, Mr. Whitaker will be notified, and the proper procedure will take place as to you seeking that this body cause your reinstatement, if this body is the right body. If not, I trust in Mr. Doyle's good faith diligence in notifying you as to what your options are as far as HR is concerned. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing to that, to make sure that in the event HR says that he has no rights to appeal to this commission, none of these are within our purview, I want to see that report and be able to analyze
Sure.
it myself and determine whether we accept Mr. Doyle's or
Right.
the city attorney's position or whether we have further questions. I don't want him to be cut off by staff or by HR or by city attorney and not have a route back to Civil Service Commission.
I agree, Commissioner Devine. It was my intention to have that report somehow see its way to us as well, not just to Mr. Whitaker.
And by the way, for the person who made the motion, that's what I was really asking for, just for HR to come back, and because I did not fully understand what it is that we're being asked to do. So that's exactly what covers, at least for I'm okay with
Very
it.
well. In the interest of moving along, can we have this be prepared for the next meeting, the report? Is that fair enough?
I believe so, Mr. Chair. And again, if I understand this, do you want a report to the commission itself, or do you want the item? Do you want a report and to have the item agendized for the next meeting?
I'd like a report. I don't know if it's appropriate to be agendized, then we can agendize it. But at a minimum, a report that Mr. Whitaker can be present and see firsthand. Of course, it'll be a public meeting.
I would have a question.
Same as agendizing, I think.
Perhaps what we could do is prepare the report for your review, and if a determination is made that it's outside the purview of the commission, then we would not then at that point agendize it. But
that determination cannot be made by anyone other than this commission. This commission has a right to make that determination as well. It cannot be unilaterally done.
we will prepare the report, you can review it, and then request at that time if it should be agendized or not.
Everybody in agreement with that assessment?
Yeah, all I want to know is what is it we're being asked to do? Let's start from there. I mean, and then if you guys can't resolve it, I mean, let's start with what is it exactly that this commission is being asked to do. That's my take as far as let's start from there, because I really still do not know.
Okay, I would ask that the motion be repeated, because there's been a lot
No
of...
motion is
Need for the motion,
necessary.
I was
Yeah.
told, so
We're
I'm
just,
assuming it's withdrawn.
Yeah.
Oh, it's withdrawn, okay.
We will have a report prepared, if appropriate, agendized. If not, provided for us for our review and our determination. If we wish to have that which is being asked of us be agendized for our discussion.
How do we determine whether or not it's appropriate if it's not agendized and we can't talk amongst
You know,
ourselves?
After you've reviewed the report, you can request of Mr. Doyle to have the item agendized. If you're satisfied with the report and it does not...
Who is can one person do it, or does
Well,
it take three of us? Or?
No, each person would submit a request to Mr. Doyle, and that determination would be made by the chair.
Okay.
So each of us will independently receive the report, independently come
Review
to
it.
our own conclusions, and then independently request of Mr. Doyle whether or not we believe it should be agendized.
And once
or
a
not.
request is made to have an item be agendized, then Mr. Doyle shares that with Chair Gazarian, and then he determines which agenda it then comes back.
That is accurate. If any one commissioner requests that an item be agendized by communicating with the director of HR, who functions as our chief examiner, Mr. Doyle, who consults with me regularly as to agendizing items, I will do my utmost to exercise good faith and good judgment and heed any commissioner's request to have the matter be agendized, and I'm confident that I will provide an opportunity for that matter to be agendized.
And certainly you can request it at the next meeting during oral comment, commissioner comment.
Can I request at this point that it be agendized?
If you're requesting that the item be agendized, I have no problem with it being agendized unless legal counsel tells us otherwise.
I go back to the same caveat that I gave you earlier, which is this may be outside the jurisdiction of the commission, and it may not be ripe for review. Prior to receiving the written report, I would advise that you not agendize it at this time, but have an opportunity to review the report and then determine whether or not you'd like to discuss rules as they relate to reinstatement or transfers in lieu of layoffs at that time. The facts may not be ripe for consideration by this commission at that time. Considering the sensitive nature of the individuals involved, it may be inappropriate to have an oral discussion about specifics during an open session.
But it may be appropriate to have a closed session.
Well, it wouldn't go under closed session, though, and so if the matter isn't ripe for review by the commission, then you can speak generally about what the rules state, but not every matter is appealable to this commission, and as a result of that, you may not. You may determine that it's not appropriate for review at that time.
Yeah, but Ms. Varpetian, to the extent that part of this letter requests that, or as Mr. Doyle described, that Civil Service Rules Section F be reviewed, can't we just agendize that particular item, that we look at Civil Service Rules Section F?
Sure, and the rules can be
That would be
reviewed.
within the purview of the Civil Service Commission, correct?
Absolutely, and I think that's the report that we're intending to bring back, is take a look at the various sections of the rules that Mr. Whitaker has identified, review them, bring you clarification as to...
I'd like the item as to that rule to be agendized, Ms. Barbetian. I appreciate your concern as to sensitive nature of it. Commissioner Devine has expressed an interest. I think Commissioner Yakubian's remarks lead me to conclude, if I'm mistaken, please correct me, that I think it is within our purview to agendize an item, specifically a rule that we abide by, and to discuss that rule to the extent it is appropriate to discuss. As a principle, as a concept, as a theory, not necessarily as it applies to an individual or a series of individuals.
Exactly. I would like to
Objection.
clarify that I meant just reviewing the rule and not specifically any issue of reinstatement or transfer in lieu of or whatnot.
We can
Thank you.
certainly do that. Thank you for
Thank
that.
you, Commissioner. Okay.
And I am in agreement. Again, let's start on that report telling us what is it exactly we're being asked to do. Let's start from there. Maybe I'm dumb. I don't understand any of this.
You're not done.
But let's start from there, and we can cover that. Let's agendize it, and the agenda would be based on that rule itself, and the report should start by what is this commission being asked to do. And we can go from there. At least I'm speaking for myself, and it sounds like everybody wants to talk about that rule. When it's agendized, we can go over all that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I mean, that part, that's the easy part. When there's an allegation of retaliation for having participated in an investigation, I think that's where Ms. Varpetian and I would have concerns.
We're not talking
because
about that.
Typically, that would be handled in an investigation, which we have a process for that. This is the first I'm seeing of this specific allegation. It's a bit unusual for that to be brought forth to this body, but we do have a process for independently investigating such allegations through our city auditor's process, or city auditor's department, which is a department separate from my department.
Let me stop you there, because we're really beating this to death. If I may, Mr.
You may.
What you're just explaining is exactly what I would want to see in a report in answering to these three items that Mr. Whitaker brought forth. I think your explanation is excellent. Let's put it in writing and send it to us with a report that addresses all three items and agendize it, I believe, as
That's fine.
indicated, and we'll hear it.
Yeah, without getting into the details of an actual case, just the process itself. So,
Okay.
The rule,
do that.
just the rule, and what the rule provides. The rule. I see what the rule provides in summary, assuming this is accurate. No disrespect, Mr. Whitaker. And if it is, I imagine you will be able to shed further light as to what that means and it doesn't mean, and we'll take it from there.
And I would like to also add one more thing. When the report is prepared, I would suggest, with the concurrence of my colleagues, that you share it with Mr. Whitaker before it comes to us to give him a chance to respond. So when we hear it, we will hear your explanation, we will hear Mr. Whitaker's response, and be able to intelligently deliberate it.
That's fine with me. Any objection as to that? I think that serves the purpose that this exercise is meant for.
So, Mr. Chair, if I understand this, we're to prepare a report addressing the three areas that Mr. Whitaker has discussed, and to agendize that at meeting. And to the extent that some of these fall within the purview of the commission, some do not, we would indicate such on the report.
Perfect.
Okay. Would I ask the commission's indulgence to not have this come back to the next meeting, but rather
But the one
meeting
after
that?
That's fine.
We have
That's fine.
kind of a long weekend, and then we have to begin
That's fine.
preparing for the next. Okay.
That's fine. I'm always happy to work with your offices. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker.
Thank you.
I see no other cards. Next item, please.
Class specification for approval, permit services technician series.
Which one is it? Oh, I see. Number 6. Okay, Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a revised class specification, the Permit Services Technician Series in the Community Development Department. More than anything, this is really the establishment of a series based around the Permit Services Technician classification. That's an existing classification that is utilized in our permit services area within building and safety within the Community Development Department. And what is being proposed by the department is the creation of 2 classifications below the Permit Services Technician and 1 above. So we have a 4 classification series starting with an assistant permit services technician, an associate permit services technician, the permit services technician, and a senior. Thus, we'd have a job series. Right now, in that operation, the basic hierarchy is that an employee would be hired in as a customer service rep, which is a kind of a generic job title. We have them all over the city. And typically after the employees develop certain levels of knowledge and skills, and I think there's a licensing requirement, they are often given the opportunity to promote up to the permit services technician. This would create a whole series where someone could literally come in entry level, learn the permit services section, the various desks and the counter duties, and then ultimately be promoted up through the ranks all the way up to a senior level. So I think that's the general gist of what's being proposed here. It's quite extensive specification, but if you have questions, again, happy to try and answer them. This is one that Ms. Akopian worked on, but she is on vacation this week, but we do have representatives from the department. Ms. Bolbolian is here to answer any questions, as well as our building official, Jan Edwards. So.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Devine?
Quite a few, if you'll bear with me.
Sure. Just keep in mind I'm going to be leaving at some point. Go ahead.
9?
No, I have a town hall meeting to attend to. Go ahead.
First of all, is the Community Development Department the only one that uses the, I'm going to say the PSTs, is it Permit Services Technician?
Yes.
I'm sorry, before you go forward, there was another handout of this series. Is this different than the one that was mailed to us?
Angela.
Because I don't want to be confused.
There was a minor change made to the one I placed on the dais than the one that was
So
mailed.
the one in the packet I should not look at. I should look at this.
And that one was also emailed to you earlier this week. The new version was emailed to you earlier
Separately?
this week. Correct.
Okay, I have not looked at it separately. I've already worked on this. That's fine. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. In looking at the org chart, it appears that the customer service representative position is going to be eliminated. Is that correct?
Not eliminated, but I think transitioned, any of those positions would be transitioned to the new series.
So what happens to customer service reps? They become something else?
Yeah, they would. I think the plan would be through transfers, promotions to.
Good evening, Civil Service Commission Chair and members. That is correct. We are proposing to reallocate the existing customer service positions to the associate level.
I'm sorry, what is your name?
Elena Bolbolian, Community Development Department.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, the CSRs then will be absorbed into the new positions.
Correct.
Classification.
Through a promotional reallocation process.
They will not be laid off?
No.
Okay.
No, they're actually adding staff. If I'm
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Will they get additional training? Because in the write-up, it indicated that this came about because of an audit that was done, and one of the items in the audit was insufficient staff level and, I guess, lack of progression. So how does this take care of those 2 items in the audit?
2 years ago, when the city went through budget cuts, we did lose several positions in the building and safety division. This audit followed those cuts. And so what the audit revealed is that we have inadequate staffing levels. In addition to the reallocations I just covered, we have approval from the city manager's office to add 4 new positions. So the new positions will help address the staff shortages. And the second component of the audit, in terms of the lack of progression, we have customer service representative and permit services technician currently. What we're proposing to do is go to 4 new classifications. So somebody coming in at the assistant level can promote to associate, obtain certification, promote to permit technician, obtain a different certification, and ultimately promote up to senior permit services technician.
Okay. And will they require a new exam? Is there going to be an exam process?
There will be an exam process for the associate level. It'll be not a state-required exam. It'll be one that the HR department, in conjunction with the building official, will help develop.
Now, if someone's on an existing layoff list for a PST, will they be picked off first to fill these 4 new positions?
We don't have an opening for permit services technician. However, we do have approval for 1 position at the senior level. And because that recruitment will happen internally, promotionally, we do anticipate 1 permit technician opening in the very near future. And we'll work with our HR department to make sure that the employees on the next agenda item on your agenda are considered for that opening.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Any other questions? Very well, thank you.
Do you have a card on this item?
Do I have a card? No.
Oh, okay, I don't.
No.
Do we need to vote on this?
Do we vote on this, do we not?
Yes.
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 Is there a motion?
Move to approve?
Second.
Unanimous?
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Request to extend names on layoff list, permit services technician.
Thank you. Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is for I think the 3rd consecutive meeting. We have some additional requests from employees who were previously affected by layoff to have their name extended on those layoff lists for an additional 2 years. As you're aware, when an employee is subjected to layoff, they are placed on an eligible list, and that list, per the rules, will last for 2 years unless the employee makes a request to extend it by an additional 2 years, and thus the Commission is authorized to grant those extensions upon request. For this particular situation, we have 2 employees, and I believe they're here tonight, Vera Cholokian and Eileen Gugassian, at the permit services technician classification. Again, the department has no concerns whatsoever about these extensions. The HR department supports it, and we therefore would request the Commission to approve these extensions.
Any questions? Yes.
I do. It gets back to what was mentioned a minute ago on, I'm not sure I quite understand. These 2 people are on the permit services technician layoff list.
That's correct.
And under the reorganization or the new classification that we just approved, there are 4 classifications, starting with the associate, senior, and then there's 1 permit services technician. So if we approve this and extend the list for 2 more years, will these 2 people have a place to go in view of the classification change that we just made?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Devine, the answer is yes, and I think what Ms. Bobolian explained was that they would be filling a senior permit services technician position, which should create a vacancy at the permit services technician level. When when that occurs and the department does fill that vacant permit services technician position, they are compelled to go to this list and select the next name on the layoff list. And I'm not sure if that's Ms. Chalokian or Gagassian, what the specific order is, but for that opening, that's one of those two individuals would get that. And then any subsequent vacancies at that level, a permit services technician, again, would have to go to the remaining individual.
I thought I heard you say, Mr. Doyle, that when I asked the rhetorical question if there was going to be any layoffs as a result of the series that we just covered, you said, no, actually, we're going to be hiring more people. Right?
Yes, yes.
So if we're going to be hiring more people, wouldn't we first reach to the folks that are on the layoff list?
Certainly. If
Yes?
maybe Ms. Bobaldian could explain, but if they were all being hired at the permit services technician level, that would be,
I see.
that is what would occur. But I'm not sure at what levels people are being hired at.
Right. The approvals we have for the new positions are 3 at the assistant level, which is 2 steps lower than the permit services technician level. And we have 1 approval to proceed with a senior permit services technician. And so essentially, right now, Ms. Gugassian and Ms. Chalakian are at customer service representative, and the assistant permit services technician, which is the lowest one, is at the same salary grade. And so
I just want to know if they're going to get rehired or not.
the plan is that because once one of the existing permit services technician promotes to the senior, that'll automatically open up at least 1 permit services technician position.
Very well. Commissioner Devine, please.
How many permit service technicians do you have now under the existing organization?
2.
2. So you're losing 1.
We're promoting one.
Promoting.
Starting one.
You're reallocating it to a senior.
It's actually a new position, so it's not a reallocation. So net one new position.
So what would these 2 individuals need to do? Right now, they're at CSR. They bumped down to CSR.
Correct.
What would they need to do? I understand that they would be eligible to go back to the 1 remaining PST position. What would they need to do to be able to fill one of the 4 new positions, whether it be at the assistant or the associate level?
Well, because they had already demonstrated working at the permit services technician, there's nothing new they need to do for the lower positions, which are associate and assistant. When the promotional opportunity comes up for the senior level, given their past work experience at the permit services center, they meet the minimum qualifications to apply for the senior level as well.
So they would have to apply and go through an exam process for that.
Correct, for the
But
senior
if they chose with the new assistant positions, which aren't filled at this point, would they be able to, and you just said their pay right now at the CSR level is the same as that.
Correct.
If they so chose, would they be eligible to be put back into the assistant at the same pay grade?
I'll respond, but I'll look for HR for confirmation. I believe they can under the lower qualifications transfer process. Similar qualifications.
It would be a lateral move. So.
I think what I'm getting to, and Mr. Gazarian really put it in succinct words, is will they get rehired, or are we spinning our wheels by putting them on a list for 2 more years?
Based on all of the reinstatement requests you've seen over the last couple of meetings, I think this is the one where they will have an opportunity given the additional positions that we've been authorized to fill.
No more questions.
Very well. Any other questions? Move to approve?
Yes.
Yes, second? Unanimous. Yes, thank you. Next item, please.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission.
Oh, next item?
Request to extend name on layoff list, administrative analyst.
Is this the one?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a similar item, request to extend name on the layoff list. This time it's administrative analyst. The employee is Marla Bess, who was laid off in the big layoff of August of 2012 from the position of administrative analyst in the ISD department, and she was able to bump down to a previous position of administrative associate in the finance department. Again, her 2 years have actually expire at the end of this month, Thus, she has also put in a request for an additional 2 years. And again, once staff supports this request and the Commission is willing to consider, we would support that.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
I'm going to ask the same question essentially in this particular class. With all the recent revisions in the class specifications that we've approved, is there still an administrative analyst position somewhere in the city that Ms. Best could transfer to?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Devine, at this point, I don't know of any vacant administrative analyst positions, but there are employees in the classification of administrative analysts. There's probably 7 or 8 of them throughout the organization. It's a little different from the permit services technician, which is kind of focused on one section of one department. Analysts can be assigned to any department. As you saw, Ms. Best worked in ISD, and she's currently in finance. So we just don't know what vacancies may arise the next 2 years. But if a department did make the decision to fill a vacant administrative analyst position, we would be compelled to go to this list and appoint Ms. Best.
Okay. And again, there are still existing administrative analyst positions in the city. They have not been reallocated or done away with the way some other positions have.
There are some, yes. Like I said, my estimate would be 7 or 8, maybe more. Sure.
Move to approve. Any other questions? Very well.
Move to approve?
Second?
Unanimous? Yes. Thank you. Next item, please.
Public hearing, adoption of resolution, report on unclassified status proposal for police officer recruit.
Thank you very much. I now open the public hearing. Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a request from staff and the police department to declare the police officer recruit classification unclassified. And this is actually an extension of the previous request and approval by the Commission that occurred back in August of 2012. This was somewhat of a unique request back then. The Commission does have the authority to declare positions unclassified, but it has to be done at a meeting, public hearing process. There are a handful of positions citywide that ordinarily would be in the classified service, but have been declared unclassified by Commission action. Traditionally, they've been positions that are grant funded, where there's limited duration for the funding of a specific position. We also have in our Water and Power Department the various apprenticeship programs where there are that last 3-4 years, and when an employee reaches a certain point in that apprenticeship program and they no longer succeed in what they're doing, rather than grant them the appeal rights and such, the unclassified status enables their removal from those programs. In those particular circumstances, those declarations of unclassified status were actually approved and supported with the support of our employee associations. In this particular circumstance, when the police officer recruit position was made unclassified, the Commission at the time felt it was appropriate to do it for a limited duration, not on a permanent basis, and they had recommended a 2-year term. So we're back after 2 years, and I think staff will present some indications that this has been successful in assisting us in hiring a good qualified, diverse police officer employees in the past 2 years. Again, the main emphasis on, or the main purpose of this is really to enable a more expedited process for hiring cops. It's very competitive, or at least it's competitive to get the best candidates. We've been hindered to some degree in the past by our selection process, which requires the strict adherence to the rule of 3. And when you couple that with the background investigation process, and again that process where you have to go right down the list, we have lost some good candidates over the years to larger departments, many of whom have, a one-stop shop where, somebody will come in, do an application, take a written exam, do a physical agility all in one day. So we don't want to do that. And again, the purpose of this is really to address the limitations of civil service protections more on the front end rather than the back end, that hiring process. Employees who are hired in as police officer recruits are probationary for that whole period of time while they're in pre-training and in the academy. They're on probation, so if they're not succeeding in their initial assignments as police officer recruits or in their training, they can be removed as at-will employees, irregardless of today's action. So, again, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Russ Kwan, and he's our HR officer for the police department, and I believe he has a very brief PowerPoint presentation to try and illustrate some of the issues we've had in the past and why we're bringing this back before you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Russ Kwan, Departmental Human Resources Officer. Like Mr. Doyle stated, 2 years ago we did come before the Commission to ask that you designate the position of police officer recruit as an unclassified position. The primary purpose behind doing that was so that the department could be much more competitive in the job market, in the sense that we needed an ability to process candidates in a much quicker fashion. What I'd like to go ahead and do is direct everybody's attention to the PowerPoint presentation. The standard rule or processing rule that the City of Glendale utilizes is what's called the Rule of Three. So for any one given vacancy, the department can only consider the top 3 candidates. So the PowerPoint presentation illustrates a total of 6 candidates, and if the department only has 1 vacancy, they can only consider the top 3 candidates. In the event for police officer recruit, we always have constant multiple vacancies, I should say. So in the case of police officer recruit, if this were the case of police officer recruit rather, if let's say we had candidate number 4 who also had 100%, where it has been a common situation where we have multiple candidates who have perfect scores or have tied scores, what we do is we go ahead and rank them on this list. So let's say the top 4 candidates have 100%. If the candidate number 4 was somebody we would like to hire, we would actually effectively have to work through candidates 1, 2, and 3 in order to successfully reach candidate number 4. The challenge behind this is the amount of time that it takes to not only process the top 3 candidates in order to reach candidate number 4, but also the fact that we're constantly competing against other agencies. We always compete against agencies neighboring us, such as the Los Angeles Police Department as well as the LA County Sheriff's Department. And with them, because of the number of vacancies that they do have and the number of resources they have, they're able to process candidates much quicker, much like Mr. Doyle stated, where they are able to have expedited testing, where that's something that we just don't have the ability to do. Another option that we spoke about in the past, and another tool that other departments have, but we unfortunately are unable to use, is what's called banding. Banding is a rule that a lot of agencies use in the area, where what they do is they group candidates together based off of their overall score. So in this case, let's say if the band is set for scores 90 and higher to be considered in Band A, in which everybody within candidates A through F can be considered, that would give the department much more flexibility. However, with the City of Glendale, we're not able to do that.
So why are we being presented that is not an option?
Yes, but this is what other agencies are using as tools.
Under our rules, this would not be allowed, which is, again, one of the reasons why we're...
Is that under our rules or under the charter?
Under the rules and the charter.
So it's not an option?
Correct.
Which is why
We could do a charter change.
Oh.
Since we're talking about the charter, how much longer do you have with your presentation?
Just a couple more minutes.
Very well. Go ahead.
Okay. The current process that we have is what's called the unclassified process. Essentially, what happens is everybody who successfully makes the eligible list with at least a 70 or higher is effectively reachable by the department. This has, in the past 2 years, this has provided the department a great amount of success in the ability to not only effectively process candidates in a much quicker fashion, but also it's also allowed the department to successfully utilize the entire list. One example I like to use is one of our recent academy graduates who actually was near the bottom of the list. However, after going through the academy, he was ranked number 3 overall. So that is something that we would like to allow the commission to consider, given the fact that under the previous practice of Rule 3, getting to the bottom of the list was very difficult because of the amount of time we had to utilize to get there. But with the unclassified process, we are able to go ahead and spread out. The department is able to spread out background investigations in a much more broad fashion. Okay. Lastly, with regards to disqualification concerns, this was an issue that the commission had in the past, in the sense that the commission had concerns about the candidate's ability to come before the commission to raise any issues that they have with the disqualifications. Within this past 2-year period, we've only had one candidate who who had been disqualified and had decided to appeal to Mr. Doyle. What I will say is that this was a psychological examination. When the appeal came to Mr. Doyle, we went ahead and went through the steps, and we did allow the candidate to move through the process. So I would like to say that the concerns here are somewhat shouldn't be an issue in that sense. But what we would like to do is go ahead and ask that the commission allow us to continue to have this position as an unclassified position, to give the department the tools to effectively staff their vacancies.
Just a point of clarification. When you say you're asking the commission to allow you to continue to have, what you really are asking is for a permanent declassification, are you not?
Permanent designation as unclassified.
As unclassified,
Correct.
right.
Yes.
Right, very well. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I thought that there was another appeal for a disqualification that had actually come through here, but I may be mistaken.
I'm sorry,
may
go
I?
ahead.
Go ahead. May I yield to Mr. Doyle? Mr. Devine, go ahead.
Yes.
On the rule of 3,
Correct.
you mentioned that if you have one opening, you have 3 candidates you can look at.
Yes.
What if you have 22 openings? Like I guess you were talking about in the report that you filled 22 positions. How many people on the list can you look at then?
Well, what we've done in the past with regards to filling vacancies at that number is we've actually gone down, we've bunched up the background investigations in the sense that we would only work, let's say, 15 at a time if we had 4 or 5 background investigators. And at that point, we would go ahead and only process the number that we could effectively reach.
But that would have no bearing whether they were classified or unclassified. You're constricted then by your resources to process them. But my point is that if you have, as I recall, the rule of 3 indicates that you can have either 1 more or 3 more than the number of openings. So 1 or 3.
It would be 2. It was the number of vacancies plus 2.
You can have 2 more. So if you have 10 openings,
Yes.
then you can look at the first 12 people on the list. Is that correct?
That's about average. The reason why I'm giving you an approximate number is because of the fact that we do have a high disqualification factor in this process. And so we always give them the buffer in the sense that we'd always give them a little more than they're entitled.
That's a political answer. You're getting good at this.
The answer is yes, if I'm not mistaken. Also, one other quick question on your presentation. You indicated that on the disqualification, if they're unclassified, they can appeal to Human Resources, a decision is made.
Right.
If that decision is adverse to the candidate, can they appeal to the Civil Service Commission if they're unclassified?
If the position is unclassified, no.
Okay. If it is classified,
Yes, they can come to the commission.
Commissioner Manukian.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just basically don't have a question. I have a comment as far as I want to be able to give Chief Castro as much flexibility as possible to be able to run his department the way he sees fit. That's my opinion, and basically I would be supporting it.
Okay. As Chief Law Enforcement Officer in the City of Glendale, I'm sure Chief Castro does not want anyone to break the rules or laws. And with that in mind, I ask you the following question.
Yes.
In the packet that we received, in the memo,
Yes.
under points of authority, Civil Service Rules and Regulations, Rule 1, Section 2, definition of terms. Quote-unquote classified service shall mean all offices, positions, and appointments in the city service, except those specifically named in or which may be designated as unclassified pursuant to these rules and or the city charter. So my question to you is whether or not the police officer recruit is a position that the charter allows it to be unclassified, because my cursory review, but I believe it's Chapter 7, does not list police officer recruit as one that can be classified or unclassified. So if you know the answer, let me know, because I really don't want to be running afoul of the charter, but at the same time, I echo Commissioner Manukian's sentiments. I certainly don't want to hamper the police department's ability to hire the finest and the best in the quickest way possible. Yes?
Chair Kazarian, maybe I can assist with
You
the
may.
response.
Sure.
We're looking at Article 24, Section 7, and in Section 7 there is an itemization of the specific positions that are exempt from classified service. There is, towards the bottom, a description of the type of additional services. This is not one that is specifically called out for, but it does state that positions in any unskilled labor class created for a special or temporary purpose and which do not exist for a period of longer than 30 days. It then goes on to say, because this particular position would exist for longer than 30 days, provided that the Commission may, upon application of the appointing agency after public notice and hearing, by the affirmative vote of 4/5 of the members, exempt any position in any unskilled labor class or any part-time, seasonal, or temporary position for such period of time as it may determine, and provided further that any such exemption shall not affect the tenure of any person whose appointment has become complete under this article. So it's that section of the charter that we're relying on in bringing this forth as...
Excuse me.
Forgive me 1 second. Finish? Are you finished?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Is this an unskilled labor position?
Thank you.
This would be what we would classify as a temporary position. As I understand it, and the chiefs can speak to this, the position is limited to the time until they complete the academy, and then upon the completion of the academy, they then become police officers. So it's that for that limited amount of time that they fulfill the role as a police officer recruit.
I'm sorry, I don't have the benefit of having the language in front of me. Does it say and or does it say is it and or?
It says or temporary position for such period. Exempt any position in any unskilled labor class or any part-time, seasonal, or temporary position for such period of time as it may determine.
Well, do we all agree it's not an unskilled position, though? I certainly hope it's not an unskilled position.
Yeah,
I hope we all agree.
I think when we refer to unskilled labor, it's probably the apprentice role in GWP that Mr. Doyle was referring to earlier.
Okay. I suppose I can make an argument that it's an unskilled position until such time that they successfully complete their studies at a police academy. They are unskilled as far as law enforcement is concerned in the art and the science and the skill of law enforcement.
That is correct. It's an entry-level job. There's no minimum requirement.
I rarely make an argument that's not correct. Thank you. But having said that, I'd like to hear from the chief as to the temporary nature, because if I'm comfortable that a police officer recruit is a temporary position until until such time that that police officer recruit completes the academy, then once they get hired as a sworn officer by the police department of our city, they no longer are unclassified, they become civil servant, right? So am I missing something?
No, and it is. I would consider them an unskilled. At this point,
Okay.
while they're traveling through their academy training,
Right.
they are unskilled, and they must pass a rigorous set of tests and programs. And it's not until successful completion of a police academy does the state of California then give them post-approval, give them post-certification, the basic certification. So up until that point, it's kind of like someone who's in law school. They are not a practicing or an effective or a skilled attorney until they pass the bar. This is the
Not even after they pass the bar.
Pardon. And I'm sure that's.
I can say that. Okay.
But that's what that is. And years ago, what happened is many cities used to send entry-level police officer positions through the police academy as a sworn officer. They weren't successful. They then became financial liabilities to the cities if they got hurt. This was a way that all cities in California began to say, we're investing too much, and it would hold up positions. This process puts Glendale on an even playing field with the many agencies that are recruiting and hiring right now, and we are finding it extremely competitive to hire people because everybody is trying to hire, and most of the applicants are going with whoever offers them the job first. And the city of Glendale has been, like many cities, in a holding pattern for pay and benefit increases. So years ago, when I first started in this career, Glendale was the top dog, and this is where people would wait and come to if they were so inclined to work in this region of the county. Now they're really looking, the new population is very transient in terms of they'll go where the job is to get into the position. So this allows us to be competitive with all the other agencies out there that are right now competing for this limited pool. 1 out of every 100 applicants are successful in this city of Glendale.
While you're there, Mr. Doyle, if I may ask, so if a police officer recruit then ultimately is hired by the city as a police officer, and I believe that when they're hired as a police officer, they're hired as a probationary police officer,
That is
right?
correct. They serve 1 year.
But they already, as a probationary police officer, they would still be given their civil service rights, would they not? They would be classified at that point. Am I correct?
Well, they would be classified. They would be sworn. They would have, all the powers of arrest.
Right. So
police
we're only
officer
talking
powers,
about
but-
the period of time that the department is interested in someone enough to send them to the recruit study phase, police academy and whatnot, and undergo whatever a police officer recruit undergoes. For that period of time, we are being asked to make the position not classified or declassify it, so that it will put the city and the police department in an even competitive level with others.
Correct.
Very well. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm just curious, what would be the advantage of the permanent unclassification versus another 2-year trial at it?
It's just the convenience of not having to come back to do this. We know where we're going to be. We can continue to move down that road. We're doing it for these basic principles. I don't see the competitive changing in 2 years. It's going to become even more difficult. The state, continues to put even more requirements on the hiring standards of police officers. So if we're doing it for the right reason, to make Glendale competitive and to ensure that I have the ability to access, hire, and quickly kind of grab up that limited pool of people providing public safety, this is something that I believe is necessary to be permanent. I don't see it changing in any other city. They've actually created ways to find inventive ways. Some cities are giving conditional job offers within a couple of days of meeting the applicant and doing those processes so rapidly. Everybody's trying to find a way they can do it even quicker. We don't give a conditional job offer till we are pretty confident the applicant meets our standards and before we give a medical or a psychological. There are some cities giving a conditional job offer just when the applicant passes the written test and the physical agility, and it's contingent on all the other stuffs. And they're trying to find ways to lock up good candidates quickly. Some candidates are putting themselves through academies. You go to those academies, we have to be able to say, we like this candidate. The academy staff says this is a good fit. They look for what we're looking for here in Glendale. We're looking for officers that are going to provide high quality customer service, even and level application and logical application of the laws using, good black and white, as well as looking at the gray area. So we're also here in Glendale, we have to hire a very unique officer that's not the right fit for, that may be the wrong fit in another community, but is right for us. So our pool is even more limited in a community like this, in a community that expects high level of service. The reason Glendale has been one of the safest cities is because of the personnel, not only in the police department, but citywide in terms of all working together and the recruitment and the expectations that this city has for its employees.
Thank you very much, Chief. I'm satisfied with the reasoning. Any other questions?
Move to approve?
No.
No. I'm
I'll go
sorry.
back to you.
Oh, is there any other speakers other than the chief? No? We're good. I now close the public hearing. Yes. I now close the public hearing.
Too many attorneys.
Yes. Well, I'm being instructed by my counsel. Deliberation. Any thoughts? Any observations? Any remarks? Any concerns? Any concurrences?
Just to be clear, we are speaking about basically police officers to be who are going through the academy for that limited time period.
That's correct.
Is that correct, Chief?
It is a non-sworn.
And so the minute that they become sworn officers, then they are no longer in this unclassified classification.
Correct. This would be for about 20 to 24 weeks. That's what the average academy is. That's what we're talking about, is it gives us that ability for that period of time.
I've reopened the public hearing.
That's okay.
It's okay? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Yes. Yes, Commissioner Herge. Yeah, no, I agree. I think I argued for it after I initially called it into issue. I argued for that unskilled.
I thought we were talking about Russ. Sorry. Move to approve.
Second.
Unanimous? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for all those.
We're moving to approve the resolution that was included in the packet for clarification.
Yes. Well, it will be a motion to adopt the resolution
That's right.
unanimously. Thank you. Next item, is there any other items, or are we adjourning?
Yes.
There is another item? I need to go, actually.
One last one.
Okay, can we make it?
11, Civil Service Commission staff comments.
I have no comments. Any comments? No. Thank you. Next item?
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you very much.